Ellis and Holly McNary and I were all high school friends from Jamestown and went to NC State and were roommates the first, maybe the whole first year, because back then they would put 3 in a room. And then Holly dropped out. And then Ellis and I came back, and I guess we stayed in, you remember the old stadium? Old stadium, Riddick, right there on the campus.
Maybe.
And Ellis and I shared a room there. And then we moved out to Bragg Hall, the new, design like that.
In the middle of the campus?
Yeah.
There were
we were roommates there until we both got married.
Those were like concrete towers, weren't they?
No, these were 2 stories, I think, or maybe 3, but 2, probably.
So I remember the dorm that I was in the first couple of years, I think it was called Welsh.
Yeah.
And directly across from it was one called Syme, I think. I thought you had told me that
Syme is where we were.
I thought you had told me you had room in there.
In the basement.
Okay.
Slimy Syme.
I don't think I ever went into that dorm when I was there. But there was the dorm I was in, and the one right next to it was the dorm that I was in was all women, and the dorm right next door to us, which was identical, was for men, and I don't remember what it was called.
But I remember that I built you that platform bed thing, and we took it down there and took it in and put it together.
You did it twice. The 2 years that I lived there, the first year I was in a corner room, and you came down to help me build elevated beds, and then the next year I was in one of the more centrally located rooms, and you did it again, a different design.
I hate to tell you, at Syme, in the basement, right in the middle was a TV room. God, I hate to tell you this. I hate to admit it. We took a cigarette, lighted, and took a cherry bomb, and they had kind of the stiff wick, and put it in like the middle of the cigarette, punched it and put it in there, and carefully put the whole thing in a trash can in the TV room. And what happens is that the cigarette burns down until it lights the cherry bomb.
And you did this inside a building next to where people were sitting?
So we're down at the end of the hall in Syme, looking up the hall, and there's the door for the TV room.
Golly, you called me
Huge
evil.
Explosion.
You called me the evil the other day.
And the smoke comes billowing out, and about 4 or 5 guys came rolling out. We've blown their eardrums out.
Oh, that's so funny.
Those were good days, right? Well, I mean, would there actually be shrapnel coming off of one of those things that might hurt somebody, or is it mostly smoke?
Just maybe the contents of the trash can went airborne like a cannon.
And then another time in Syme, there were these 2 guys that lived right around the corner from us. And they were from up here somewhere, hillbillies. And we would go, and in the center of Syme was the entrance door and had a porch with a roof over it. And we would go up there, and you could look right down there, and that was their room. And we would throw water balloons down, and it would just hit the screen, and the balloon would break.
So do these people know that you were the one behind all these pranks?
No. But
and who's we, by the way?
Ellis and me.
Oh my God, just the 2 of you?
Maybe Holly was involved. Maybe there was another kid involved. I don't remember. So anyway, we did that a couple of times. And then one of the kids in that room, and I saw him go up to where we were throwing the balloons from. And he went out on the porch and was watching for us. And I saw him go out there. I hate to tell you this. So I go around with a trash can and fill it up with water and go up on the third floor and pour it out on this guy. And then ran like hell. And in a minute, he came into our room because we're in the hall, the door was usually open. He was soaking wet, and I had had time to get back down there. And here I am sitting on the bed, all innocent looking. He came in looking for whoever
How
dumped
could
the
you
water
keep a
on.
straight face through that?
And there I sat, innocent, you know.
Don't know what's going on.
Jeez, what a criminal, really.
And so you mentioned the Holly. There was a guy named Holly.
Yeah, that was our roommate, and he's still alive and lives near Tom Hollingsworth,
What's his last name?
McNary.
Holly McNary. Never heard of a guy named Holly before. So we were talking about David earlier, and you were telling me some of the things that he did or got involved with after Laurie and I left to go to college, and talked about him getting kicked out of school.
Yeah.
And
this was very near the end.
And then, so what activities would he do? Like, was he involved in any kind of sports or anything when he was in school?
Well, when we first moved to Charlotte, he played some baseball and was good. He had a good arm. And I never will forget the coach. He was playing outfield. And some kid hit the ball way out there to David. And the kid was going to break for home. And I was standing beside the coach, and he said, "You come on, try that." Because he knew David could throw that damn ball from deep center field right to the catcher.
Really? And did he?
In that particular case, I think the kid chickened out or something.
Yeah.
But he would have been out.
Well, I never knew that about him.
Well, I've got some pictures of him with his uniform.
Yeah, I think I've seen those.
And he could have probably been a pretty good ball player if he'd have pursued it.
You want to ask your dad about what schools he went to, because he was back and forth a little bit for getting his bachelor degree. How did that, after high school, how did that work play out?
He graduated high school, came up here to Appalachian, dropped out before they kicked him out, came back home, started working. I remember one company was Harbor Freight Company in Charlotte. And maybe a couple of others, and then he was selling stereos. And that's the great story I tell, which is true, when he came to me and said, "I want to go back to school." God, that was one of the greatest moments of my life.
And where did he start? When he first started going to college, where did he start?
Well, he came up here, and then he went in, and when he dropped out, he didn't do anything. And
what was he trying to major in the early days, or did he know?
I don't even remember. But he started going to Central Piedmont, which is, by the way, was the largest institution of higher learning in North Carolina. It had over 50,000 students.
It was a community college, right?
Right in Charlotte.
Uh-huh.
Somebody called it, what is it called? I think it was like UCLA, which is Lower College, Elizabeth Avenue, because that's where it was. But so that's when he decided to start back. And so he went back there and got his 2-year degree.
And what was that in? Do you remember?
It was technical, but he had met a young teacher who was an NC State graduate and engineering graduate, became friends, and that guy inspired him. And so when he got his degree from Central Piedmont, then he went on out to UNC Charlotte.
I remember when he was in his 20s that he wanted to be a pilot, and then he realized that you have to have perfect vision to be a pilot, and his vision wasn't perfect. And
Yeah,
and then after that, he was thinking, well, if I can't be a pilot, I'd like to be an aviator.
yeah.
But then that wasn't going to be a career path because of his epilepsy. I seem to remember there was him talking about wanting to do those two things. Does that ring a bell at all?
When I was in ROTC state, I wanted to be, it was, I guess, Air Force ROTC, and I wanted to be a pilot. And then, of course, I couldn't. I was colorblind.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody said, well, you can be a navigator. I said, now, if I can't be a pilot, hell with all me.
I think I meant to say navigator a minute ago. I didn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
That may be me you're thinking about.
No, I'm pretty sure it was David.
David wanted to be a navigator or a pilot?
He wanted to be a pilot first, but then he didn't have 20/20 vision. And apparently everything, if you're going to be a pilot, everything is going to be perfect, right? And so then the second choice was to be a navigator, but he wasn't able to, pursue that route because of his epilepsy, even though it was under control with medication. And so you said he went to UNCC, went to community college, and then went to UNCC.
Mm-hmm.
And how many years was he at UNCC?
Maybe like 2.5 or something.
And what was his
Mechanical
engineering? And so he got an undergraduate degree from UNCC.
Yeah. And I was telling my hygienist this morning, because she asked me about David, and she didn't know that he'd passed. And she's really sweet. But so he went to work. I can't remember the name of the company right now, but it was in Marion, Virginia. And that's when, about 2 years later, he called me up. I was at the office in Charlotte. He said, I quit my job. I said, oh my God. Why? Because I've been accepted at Wake Forest. And that business school at Wake Forest is top notch, called the Babcock School.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that he kind of followed what I did career wise, just
It's the biggest compliment he could have ever paid you.
but, and then, as you know, he wanted to go to work for Intel, but he didn't because his mama was sick. So he hung around.
Mm-hmm.
And after she died, and I thought about this, and so he loaded up a U-Haul truck with a car carrier on the back trailer and put his little Volkswagen on that and made the trip to California. And I thought many times that I should have gone with him, just to keep him company.
So you were telling us a story the other day about the house that you designed and built in Asheville.
Right.
and having all the guys from the plant coming out, and they all helped each other build houses and whatnot. And we were talking about drilling the well, and then you were talking about when you had done all the wiring and all the electrical for the house, and the inspector guy came out, and you thought he was a jerk, right? You
Well, his reputation was that he was a real asshole.
Mhm.
He was a county electrical inspector. So he came out. We had pulled a permit. I somehow found this electrician somewhere that pulled a permit for us months ago. And we wired it. The guys from the plant helped. And we had 2 panels down in the basement, and the wiring came down, came in horizontally, and turned vertically. All the wiring was parallel, just like the plant.
Uh-huh.
So this guy comes out and then the final inspection. Ceiling heat. I'd put the wires up. I'd staple them every so often, like the code said. He comes out, final inspection, says, "I can't approve it." Man, my heart sunk. He said, I said, "What's wrong?" He said, "Well, there's a couple, 3 staples in that back bedroom that there's not close enough together. It's supposed to be X inches apart." I said, "Oh, God." Because it was final inspection. He said, "However, if I had a staple gun, I just want to put them in and approve it." And I said, "I'll bet you I know where I can find a staple gun." But that just was touching, because here's this guy whose reputation, and he had the heart, because he knew that we'd wired that house.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just really.
And so how'd you get it resolved?
He took the staple gun. I gave it to him out of the boot of the Renault.
Uh-huh.
He took it in the house, and then he came out, handed me the papers. Final inspection approved. And I mean, that's what I believe, that most people have a heart and they want to do the right thing. And here's this guy who had his reputation, and he it's wonderful. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Okay, that's a good story. Do you have any other questions, Charlie?
No, I'm glad you told that story
Okay.
for the thing.
And did y'all love that house, the short town that you had to live in it?
We did. I continued to work on it. And then when I came in, 7 months later, and told your mama that I'd been transferred to Raleigh, I thought she was going to kill me.
Oh no, what did she say?
Well, she loved the house. And
Did she start crying?
she said, "You asshole. What do you mean? We got to leave this brand new house."
Oh.
Anyway.
And Charlie had been asking me before we came up here that, how did your dad end up in the mountains? And so I was telling him about how, well, we lived in Asheville when we were little kids, and my mother loved it there, and it was always her dream to end up back up in the mountains somewhere. And is that true?
Well, I was working for the power company, and we were building the Asheville plant. And I don't remember how it happened, but I basically signed up to be transferred up there, as did 6 or 8 other guys from Hartsville. And so when the time came, we packed up. However, the company moved us that time.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have to be like a bunch of gypsies.
And you had a second little baby daughter at that point, right?
Yep. Well, shortly thereafter. No.
I thought Laurie was born in Hartsville.
Yeah, she was.
How long did we live in Hartsville?
Just 2 years.
2 years.
But then along came this little tow-headed boy. Memorial Mission Hospital in Asheville. which was a good hospital.
Uh-huh.
And of course, your mom was diagnosed with
Crohn's disease.
Crohn's disease.
Was that shortly after David was born?
I don't remember. But there was this doctor who was wonderful and treated her. And I mean, he was really semi-famous. And then he died of cancer. So,
what was that like? I mean, she got really, really sick.
oh yeah, she had to really be careful of what she ate, and she'd have to go to the bathroom.
Why didn't she almost die from that?
She got very sick.
And because I remember when she was, getting near the end with cancer, I was with her one day. It was just me and her, and I don't remember if we were in the car or what the deal was, but she said to me, in terms of being in a place where you have to be thinking about the end of your life or whatever, she said, "Holly, I've been here before."
Yeah.
And I know she was referencing, being so sick when we lived in Asheville.
There are pictures of her, and she's still pretty, but she is really skinny.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, he put her on prednisone, which has huge side effects.
I thought she didn't go on prednisone until we moved to Charlotte, and she had a flare up.
I don't remember. But anyway, he put her in remission as far as the Crohn's was concerned.
Mm-hmm.
Well, wait a minute. He operated on her
She had surgery in the 60s
in Asheville.
and removed part of her large intestine. Is
Yes.
that correct?
Yeah. One of the guys, and from the power plant, she needed blood, and so 2 or 3 of the guys
Oh my goodness, I never heard this before.
gave blood for her.
Mhm.
And this one guy said, "Yeah, she's got a semicolon," because they took out a bunch of her colon.
Okay. That's
It's
funny.
nice of your coworkers to step up and do
Oh,
that. That was
it was-
crazy.
There was, I can't remember exactly, I get confused with Goldsboro, but there's probably about 60 people working there.
Mm-hmm.
All guys except, I think all guys except for the secretary. But it was a family,
Mm-hmm. Sounds like it.
because we came from all over there to start that plant up.
Wasn't there like picnics? There was like a little picnic area out there at the
Oh, yeah.
plant, and the plant would have like family picnics or whatever. I kind of
And the
remember.
guys would have picnics.
Uh-huh.
And we'd get out there and start telling jokes, and it would go on for hours because somebody tells a joke and it reminds you of one, and then you tell it, and all sitting around drinking beer.
And I'm assuming the other fellows had kids as well, and there'd be little kids running around.
Some of them, yeah, we had a family picnic, but if it was just the guys, then no.
Oh, you just had guys' picnics, huh?
Oh, yeah. Pretty fun.
I remember, and I could have dreamed it, but I think it really happened that when Mama was in the hospital, and you took the 3 of us to go visit her, and we're sitting in the waiting room, and I remember a nurse or somebody was pushing her down the hallway in a wheelchair, and when she saw us, she just started crying.
Oh, man. It was tough times because none of us really knew what the future held. And got past that and had many, many years of happy years. But I remember, we were together with Harold and Dorothy Griswold in Williamsburg when Harold died.
Mm-hmm.
And Pat said, don't put stuff off. And we didn't. We did a lot of good traveling, good trips and stuff after that. And we went Rotork, which was a great company, English company that we represented. We went to several of their sales meetings. I'm mixed up on my times because the first time we ever went to London was when we came to see you. But I think we stayed in that little kind of crummy hotel.
I don't remember where we stayed in London.
Yeah. But one time, and I think maybe it was when we went back, because Rotork had a meeting in Spain. So we went to London for a couple of days. And I went to this hotel. In fact, we spent the night there. And it rained and it leaked in our room. And I got up the next morning and said, the hell with this. Walked down the street, I remember it was a Bayswater Road, and saw this hotel. It was a Best Western. Turns out it was owned by Norwegians. We went up and the room was magnificent. 2 stories, bed was up second level. The breakfasts were like what? Norwegian, Swedish kind of buffet. Wonderful. And so we stayed there, then went to Spain, and then came back and stayed there a few more days. And then went back at least one other time and stayed at that same hotel. Can't remember the name, I could look it up. And I guarantee you, I've got albums out there of all these trips that we made. And of course, when we came out, when you were there, you took us up to Scotland and we went to Malik, which is one of my very favorite places in the world. And I went back there at least once with your mom, maybe twice. And then I took Mary Ann up there.
What does she think about it?
Oh, man. And I've told the story that Malik was a fishing village, Charlie. The fishing boats would go out for 3 days and then they would come in. And across the water was the ice house. They would come in and they'd dump crushed ice into the hole and come over on this side to unload the fish. And I may have told you the story, I'm sorry. So you had, I think, 2, maybe 3 men down in the hole, and the captain up here running this little crane. And he was, I'm sure, was dropping pallets, but they had pallets with special things, with shallow. The guys in the hole would pack the fish on the ice, and then the captain would drop the hook down, pick the thing up, bring it up, swing around, and drop it on the dock. There's a guy on the dock, and they'd have 3 high. He'd pick them up with a forklift and go put them in the truck to take them from Malik down to Glasgow to the packing house. I sat there and watched it for at least an hour. I was fascinated. And I've told a bunch of people this, there is not a time and motion expert in the world that could have improved on my operation 1 second. It was just choreographed. It was perfect. And it just fascinated the heck out of me. In fact, now that I think about it, I wish I'd made some pictures of it, but oh well.
So, what's your favorite place that you've ever been to outside of this country?
Probably Mallet. I want to go back because a lot of Scotch whiskey is distilled in a valley area, kind of in the center of Scotland, north of Glasgow and Edinburgh. I don't know what to call it. But there is a movie titled The Angel's Share. Have you ever seen it? Oh, and what it's about is that these 2 or 3, and there may have been a girl involved, teen, like late teen, early 20s, in Glasgow. And they had an older friend who was kind of a mentor. And somehow or another, he found out and told them that this one distillery was distilling this run of very special Scotch whiskey. And they came up with this idea to go up there and steal some. And it's a very elaborate plot and all that, but the angel's share is the vapors that come off during the distillation process. That's the angel's share. So they figured out how to do it, and they stole a bunch of it.
They did.
And they, of course, made, and it wasn't a bunch. I mean, it's several bottles, but it was very, very valuable stuff. And they of course, had a bottle for him that they brought back, and then they were able to get away with it. And
So, what does the vapors have to do with the story?
well, that's the angel's share. The vapors are the angel's share.
In the cask, they fill the cask up, and then when they open the cask, the volume's been reduced a little bit because of evaporation of the vapors, and that missing portion they call the angel's share.
And they actually sample it, I think, during the process, and the sample comes out into a vessel, and you have the angel's share. Okay. You should try to look it up sometime and see if you can download it and watch it on TV.
I like watching those movies from that region of the world when it's really hot in Texas. It's a nice contrast.
Yeah.
So we'll look that up.
Honestly, I'd love to go back to Scotland. And I hate the thought of riding a damn airplane. But once you get there, you can get on the train and then you're good. I like to go to Mallet, stay in the hotel. I can't remember the name of it. Huge hotel in Mallet, which the railroad built. And your mom and I were there one time, sitting in the lounge with the fireplace, warm fire, nice, drinking. And this young couple who had just escaped the Iron Curtain were there, and we were talking with them. And the wind was blowing, and the wind was rattling, and it was an old hotel. But what an experience that was. And then the other experience, which I think you know about, is we were there in that hotel, and your mom was knitting, and I don't know whether she knew and forgot or got confused or what, but she couldn't cast off. You know what that means? She couldn't finish. And there was about 10 women sitting over here in the sunroom knitting. And I said, I'll bet you, if you go over there, one of them can show you how to do it. And sure enough, they did. without blinking, you know?
I guess casting off is a way to finish the knotting so it won't unravel
Yeah. And then you can
and finish.
cut everything loose, take the needles out, and you're done. Well, I bet you
Chicken story.
somebody, and of course, every one of them knew how to do it. They've been doing it for years. They were old men. And we would go in there and have dinner in the bar, because as you know, the bar meals were what, half the price of if you go in the dining room and sit at the table. You go in the bar and sit at the bar table and get the same food for half price.
I didn't remember that.
Yeah. Malik was wonderful. I think it was when you and your mom and I were there the first time that we had lunch in town and had salmon, fresh salmon, raw, for lunch, which of course is a delicacy.
I totally do not remember that. What's the best place you and Marianne have ever been together on a trip?
Well, of course, there's been a bunch of them, but Malik is right up there. But then when your mom and I went, we went to this convention in Detroit, and we were having some problems with David.
When was this?
When he was probably, I don't know, late high school, early college, something. And I made arrangements for him to fly up to Detroit the last day of the convention. And we rented a car and took off from Detroit and went up into Canada and across to Toronto. And I remember, but stayed in Toronto, which of course is a fantastic modern city with a lot of skywalks for when it snows 2 feet deep.
Mm-hmm.
And then we came back down through Niagara Falls and through upstate New York and then back down through Pennsylvania and back home. And David did some of the driving, so he had his driver's license. And it just sort of changed the whole dynamic.
Really? What do you mean? How so?
Well, because number one, it said to him, I've got confidence in you. Number two, it was a wonderful experience and a wonderful time for the three of us to be together.
So you got along the whole trip?
Yeah.
What kind of problems when you said you were having?
Well, just, late teens, whatever. Just hard-headedness and know-it-all and nothing suits you. And
So it was just being kind of difficult to be around, maybe?
you were there.
Mm-hmm.
And I was
No, I wasn't. I wasn't.
No.
Think about. Oh, you mean I acted that way?
No.
Sure
It's
you
a
did.
teenager.
All kids do.
Because I thought about that because when Laurie and I left, he was there alone
Yeah.
in the house. He was the only teenager left, and I would imagine there'd be some dynamics with that.
And we went to counseling.
You did?
We did.
You and Mom, or you and David, or all three of you?
us.
Really? I
And
never
we
knew
had this
that.
one counselor in Charlotte who was worthless. And, I can't remember, but then we found this next counselor, and he was really good.
And so, because I've never heard this story ever. David never said anything about it. And I don't
And so
remember.
we would go as a joint session, and then we would go individually.
Wow.
And this guy was just terrific.
And so what was the biggest issue that you were talking about? Do you
Just
remember?
the teenage rebelliousness about being a teenage boy.
Is that kind of what the counselor identified?
Oh yeah.
Just being like typical rebellious
Well, yeah.
teenager?
And he'd been there and done that,
Yeah. Was this like after he got the speeding tickets?
Yeah.
Was there other things that happened?
I can't remember.
I mean, there must have been something more than a speeding ticket to get y'all to go to counseling.
Oh well, it was everything. Poor grades, just
Okay.
discipline, just,
Talking back at you or something? Or?
everything. If you had have ever raised a teenage son, you would know exactly what I'm talking about.
Well, you talk about how good and sweet and
And
trouble-free he was earlier.
I guarantee you that would continue.
Oh, he'll tell you stories that will curl your ears
Yeah.
about what